Perfect. So the mission of the Jewish Women Speak About Intimacy is to help women access the power of the gift of marital intimacy, to become one with Hashem, with their spouse, and with themselves. Our goal is to educate, inspire, and provide practical tools to make this a reality. We are so excited to have Rivka tonight with us, who just do that. Haya, if you could introduce her.
My pleasure and honor. We finally made it, Rivka. Very exciting. Rivka Sidorsky is an AASECT. Do we pronounce it like that? AASECT? AASECT certified sex therapist, a licensed clinical social worker, a board certified supervisor, a published author, a Harvard University Research Fellowship recipient, and an experienced lecturer. She's the owner and director of a group psychotherapy practice in Silver Spring, Maryland. She's a professional member of the American Association of Sex Educators, Counselors, and Therapists, the International Society for the Study of Women's Sexual Health, and the International Society for Sexual Medicine. She was personally mentored and was trained in sexual dysfunction and sex therapy from internationally renowned Dr. Laura Berman, Oprah's relationship and sex expert. In addition to her private practice, she speaks widely on improving intimacy, female function and dysfunction, and on intimacy after cancer at professional conferences, universities, hospitals, and for community events. She lives in Silver Spring with her husband and their 4 children. And I think we'll give contact information afterwards in our chat. And we're so honored to have you. Thank you for joining us and agreeing to speak for us.
Thank you. Chana, should I share my screen now?
Chana, your mic is off. You were saying something.
Yeah, I said I just wanted to start out when we were talking together, Rivka. We were talking about like, what do we want to speak about? What is the message we want to give tonight? And one of the things that we said is that we want everybody to come away with, whenever they think about intimate relations, it's about a gift that was given to the couple. It was something that we both enjoy, that we participate in, and that we want each other to be happy. We both give and receive. And really, as soon as we think about it, it's about, this is a gift to the couple, to express love, to show love, to increase love. And this is like the message that we want to give.
100%.
Okay. So we started with the message, and now we're going to figure out how do we do that? So that's what you're here to do.
So let me share my screen. Okay, can you guys see that? Yeah, okay. All right, play. Okay, so the title of this talk is Taking Marital Intimacy from Good to Great, Understanding Yourself and Your Husband Better. I put below my qualifications, my email, my office number, my website, if anybody wants to be in touch with me. And also feel free to grab your husbands. So that, I don't know if everybody knew that, but that's perfectly fine with me. And I really tailored this talk for both of you. So I'm really hoping that everyone gets a lot out of it. Okay, so what types of patients do we treat? Primarily pelvic pain, unconsummated marriage, sexual anxiety and aversion, infidelity, desire disorders, anorgasmia, couples therapy, male sexual dysfunction. And then we have a group private practice in Maryland, Virginia, and New Jersey. And so we only practice in those 3 states. So unfortunately, if you contact us out of those states, we're unable to see you, but we have colleagues that we can refer you to. Okay, so the goals of the presentation are to introduce you to basics of sexual response cycle, general advice for couples, and help for common sexual concerns. And then at the end, some information on when to seek professional help. So why is this important? The difference in sexual desire will exist in most marriages. No 2 people are exactly alike, but some couples experience this farther apart than others. Interestingly, you commonly find the high desire men with the lower desire female, and you'll find the higher desire female with the lower desire male. So those couples are going to have a lower existence of this problem. I think somebody is not muted. And then there are some couples that are going to have a really high, they'll be very far apart on this issue, unfortunately. Approximately 40 million Americans suffer from female sexual dysfunction. 45 to 75% of women experience sexual dysfunction in their lifetime. That refers to pain, problems with desire, orgasm, so those would be what this is referring to. And so that's a huge number. And according to Edward Lohman, 43% of women will experience sexual dysfunction. So this is extremely prevalent. And then most of the people on this talk are going to experience some difficulty with some of these issues in their lifetime. And then it's also just highly embarrassing, shameful, and unfortunately, it shouldn't be that way, but it is. And there's not a lot of continuing education. So I'm really hoping that tonight is a continuing education for a couple, which we don't get to see that a lot, even in the secular world. Okay, so I like to start off with a little quiz. I don't know how to do polls and things on Zoom, but in the interest of time, I put in this little quiz for you. If you've been to any of my talks, you have heard this before. This is just gives you some sense of what's average, and I think that helps people. And I'll explain why. So how long does the average woman take to reach orgasm? Just take a minute to think about that. Or I don't know if people want to chat it in, although I can't find my chat at the moment. So I'm not seeing my own chat. I don't know where it went. So I'm not able to see if people are posting things or asking me questions. So I'm not sure. So if somebody, oh, here's my chat. But if somebody wants to chat that in, that's fine. So the correct answer is 45 minutes. It takes the average woman 45 minutes to reach orgasm. So so that information might help you because it might take you quite some time, or you might feel that you're anorgasmic. But if you gave yourself 45 minutes, I wonder what your reaction would in fact be. How long does the average man take to reach orgasm? So just take a second to think about that. Okay, now the correct answer is 2 to 5 minutes. Okay, so as you can see, the discrepancy between a man and a woman is quite vast when it comes to an orgasm. So that can cause a little bit of problems sometimes. Okay, I appreciate that some people are texting into the chat. Thanks. How long is the average length of intercourse? Any guesses into the chat? So the answer is 2 to 5 minutes. Exactly. Good. One person got it right. So yes, the average length of intercourse is 2 to 5 minutes. Under 2 minutes is considered premature. And after, I believe, 15 minutes is considered delayed. So that just gives you some idea. Again, I think it's important to kind of have some concept of these things because you don't necessarily know if your experience is average. And I think that a lot of people think that they're abnormal when in fact, they're falling totally within the range or they're not giving themselves enough time. Or a lot of women, for example, will have dryness or pelvic pain. And then when you ask about the length of intercourse, it turns out it's 20, 30 minutes. And so if you have a sense of average length of intercourse, you have some sense that, the intercourse is lasting too long, that it's drying her out. So, it's just a good sense to have some of this information. What's the most common sexual concern among women? Any guesses? Okay, one person's guessing pain, low desire. It's low desire. That's the most common concern among women. And what is the largest and most important sexual organ? And I remember one, the brain. Great. So that is the correct answer. One person guessed in one of my lectures, skin, which is a great guess because that is a large amount of surface area, but it's actually the brain. In fact, so much so that sexual dysfunctions are in the book of diagnostic psychological disorders. So in fact, like orgasm difficulties is really considered a psychological dysfunction, as is pain and, and desire disorders. How often do couples typically have sex? So this is, any guesses? Anybody want to chime in? Averages? Somebody's guessing. Of course, it depends. 1.5 times per week or so. Somebody's saying it depends. So in fact, it is about once a week. Interestingly, this doesn't change a lot throughout the lifespan. So for a young couple, in teens, 20s, it's about 1.5 times a week, or once every 5 days. And then for seniors, it's about once every 10 days. So it's about once a week for the lifespan, interestingly. A lot of people think that it really decreases significantly, but it actually doesn't, on average. The reason why it's important to know is because I have had couples come to me for a presenting problem of, differences in desire or not enough sex. And when I ask the question about frequency, I have gotten the answer of, multiple times a day. And they're coming to my office because it's not enough. So that gives you a sense of what really is the problem. It's very important to know the frequency because then you really get a sense of what is going on here. Why does that feel like it's not enough? And then what's the definition of a sexless marriage? Clinical definition. Any guesses? Yes, once a month. So that is the definition of a sexless marriage. The reason, like I said, that this is important is because it gives you a sense when you're talking about if something feels like a problem. It helps you determine what really is the problem. Like I was saying, if somebody comes to my office and, they think that one partner thinks that they don't have enough sex and they're having sex multiple times a day, that is a different problem than if they're having sex twice a year. So, really is a very different situation. Okay. So this is an introduction to the male sexual response cycle. So this is how men work. You'll start with desire and you'll lead with excitement, arousal, leads to orgasm, and then a resolution. So it's a fairly linear model. We're probably fairly aware of Masters and Johnson's model of male sexual response. It's fairly straightforward, and men will commonly have some desire before their arousal. So this is very, very old research from the 60s, still stands up today. In contrast, the female model for sexual response is, so somebody's asking a question, let me just read it. Okay, so yes, I didn't clarify. Somebody's asking about like Jews who keep Tahara Mishpacha, and if they're doing 2 weeks, the 2-week cycle. So in that sense, it would probably be 4 times a month. so twice a week in their 2-week period. So probably 4 times would be what I would guess is average for for observant Jews.
And in
Okay.
general, I think that is what they recommend today, is that to try that should be the average. Like that should kind of be the goal, to try to do it. Sometimes it'll be the 1, the 2, but that should be like what we should try to achieve.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you might look at this female model of sexual response and be like, I have no idea what this I'm looking at, so let me walk you through it. Basically, it's a circle, and you can jump into the circle at any point. So let's imagine you jump in through emotional intimacy. So what this looks like is you're spending time together, you're talking or doing something together, and having emotional connection. Then it will lead to a sexual stimulus. Sexual stimulus is referring to a touch, a kiss, something happens. Then when after the sexual stimulus, you'll have arousal. After the arousal comes the sexual desire. After the sexual desire will be emotional and physical satisfaction, which may or may not include an orgasm. And that will lead to a feeling of emotional intimacy again. And as long as we stay in the cycle, relatively frequently, it's a good cycle. Somebody's asking, what is arousal? So I will go into that a little bit more. That's the state of becoming aroused is the physical sensations of getting, turned on, as far as, blood flow, lubrication, there's hormone secretion, there's, for men and women, there is engorgement. So I actually have a slide on that later. The importance with this slide is that many, 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 many women complain of low sexual desire. Now, what they're really complaining of often is lack of or low spontaneous sexual drive. Now, if you see in the middle of the diagram is the green, it says spontaneous sexual drive. So what that refers to is you're just standing in the kitchen and you spontaneously have a thought that, oh, it would be nice to have sex tonight. Nothing happened to you. Nobody touched you in any way. And yet this feeling spontaneously happened. So only 20 to 30% of women will experience that feeling. The rest, 70 to 80% of women, will not experience spontaneous sexual drive. In fact, the only way they feel desire is after they're aroused, after they've been engaging in physical intimacy, in touching, kissing, etc. So it's extremely important that you don't wait until you're in the mood to get into bed and start touching, because according to this cycle, right, the touching comes first. First, it's the touching, then you become aroused. And after you become aroused, now do you want to have sex? Well, that's the desire. So that's called responsive desire. Your sexual desire is evolving from being aroused. And if that happens to you, you're totally normal, no problem. That's normal. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about the fact that you may or may not have spontaneous sexual drive. Many men wish their wives had spontaneous sexual drive, but they need to let that go, because that is and I hope many men are listening tonight and can hear that message, that if your wife does not experience that spontaneous drive from nothing happening absolutely to them, that's okay. That doesn't mean they don't love you. So we'll talk about later how you can deal with that problem. But I just want to point out that if after you're aroused, then you have desire, there's no problem at all. Okay, so a little bit of a lofty slide, but I have 2 slides here on contributors to female sexual dysfunction and male sexual dysfunction. I just wanted to point out that so often I hear people blaming a sexual problem on one factor. For example, somebody will post on an internet forum, like the forum that we are from, that, oh, I have low desire. And, what ideas do people have for me? And so often people will chime in and say, you need to get off your birth control. You need to get off your birth control. You need to get off your antidepressant. If you're on an antidepressant, you're going to have, low desire. There's your answer. This chart shows all the complexity, which I'm sure there's even more, but these are some of the things I wrote down. All this complexity to explain why you're having the problem that you're having. And as a side note, by and large, in my experience, the antidepressants have been extremely helpful in helping sexual functioning, not hurting. So I definitely don't encourage people to just get off their Zoloft, for sexual functioning. In fact, I've found that it helps so much, even though it's a side effect, but the side effect is actually delayed orgasm, interestingly, for men and for women. Somebody's asking, is this low desire or dysfunction? So this chart explains all the different problems. So let's say pain, problems with orgasm, problems with low desire, all the sexual dysfunctions can be found answers in this chart. So if somebody is having, let's say, problems with orgasm, I ask every one of my clients all these questions. So I'll go through the chart in a minute, just briefly, but let's say psychological. Is the person really anxious? Does the person have low self-esteem? Do they have a history of abortions or miscarriages? I once had a client who she didn't have any sexual problems, and then now she's coming to me and she has persistent low desire. And come to find out that she had an unplanned pregnancy and an abortion when she was younger in college. And ever since that abortion, she translated that experience that her sexual desire created this bad event. So she basically shut off her sexual desire ever since that point. So a history of so that's an example. I'm not saying everybody is going to have that experience. I'm saying that we need to go digging around and find out what might be going on there. Social, cultural, religious norms. I've had clients. I remember I had a client that she comes from a evangelical Christian background, and she one time was holding hands with her boyfriend at the shopping mall, and a teacher from her school saw them, and the pastor of the church made her get up in front of the entire church and apologize for her behavior. And, again, she shut down all sexual desire from that point. I mean, she was like 16. And she has a lot of problems at this point, and it dates back to problems starting then. Now, I'm not saying that any one particular religion is harmful. I'm just saying that's an example of where somebody's sexual dysfunction can be found in some of these factors. Lack of sex education, feeling unprepared for marriage. Those are some psychological factors. Okay. Physical, you might have medications, you might have high blood pressure, hormonal issues, breastfeeding, menopause, pelvic floor dysfunction, vulvodynia. If you have pain, that's a pretty good reason why you would have low desire, right? If every time you ate chicken, you threw up, I'm pretty sure you would not desire chicken. So if you have a bad experience with something, then it's probably likely that you're going to have an aversion or lack of desire for it. I mean, that just makes sense. Somebody's asking if one should be able to have sex without lubricant. For the most part, yes, that one should not need lubricant. However, you might have some hormonal deficiencies. You might be low on estrogen or testosterone. You might have other medical conditions. You might be breastfeeding or menopausal. By and large, my recommendation is that you probably just need more foreplay and more arousal. Okay. I'm not sure if I should answer everybody's questions as I go along because I have so much content, but I'll try.
We could wait, Rivka, till the end. We can
Yeah,
do it and then we can go through it.
I have tons of
That's a good
content.
idea.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in the relational category, so again, you have, one time I had a client, she comes into my office. The problem why I'm here is I have low desire. Okay. Tell me about your relationship with your husband. And she looks at me and she says, I don't even like him. So, the relationship with your husband, if you don't like the guy, or if you fight a lot, or if you have a lot of conflicts, you have a lot of problems with the balance of power, or if sex becomes a power play, for example, that's going to be a contributing factor. So what I'm trying to just introduce in this slide is that if you're experiencing any one of the sexual concerns like desire concern, arousal concerns, pain, or orgasm difficulties, take a look at this chart and you're probably going to find some of your answers here. Here, I also have the male chart. I'm not going to go into a lot of them are the same. Interestingly, one thing I just wanted to point out is stress is a really big factor for especially for men. So I just want to put that out there, and self-esteem with work-related things, that's a very big factor in male sexual functioning. And if you're a younger man who has erectile dysfunction, just beware that it is worth really seeing a doctor about that rather than just getting a prescription for Viagra, because it can be a sign of some cardiovascular issues as a young man. So you just really want to find out if something is wrong with your heart. And I did have a client who was young, early 20s, and we did find something with his heart, which I'm just really glad he didn't just go to any old doctor to just give him a script for Viagra. Okay, here are my top 3 tips. So these are the 3 things that I want you to specifically work on. Doesn't matter what your problem is. It doesn't matter if your problem is differences in sexual desire, low desire, problems with pain, problems with orgasm, erectile dysfunction, premature ejaculation, any problem, it's going to boil down to these 3 things probably. You probably need to be more relaxed. You probably need to be more in control, and you probably need to be more aroused. Those are the 3 things I want everybody to keep their eyes on. So whatever the problem might be, you're probably going to find the solution in those 3 areas. So I just want you to kind of keep that in your mind, that I find that those are the 3 treatment areas that treat sexual dysfunctions in men and women. We definitely need to get away from this language of we need to be there for our husbands. That's not helpful, and it is causing more problems than good. Sex is about mutual pleasure and connection. It's not something you do. It's somewhere you go together. Okay. So I wanted to kind of put that out there. This is not an obligation. This is not something that one person gives to the other person. This is somewhere you go together. Somebody's asking about being in control. So what I mean by that is that you feel like you chose this. You can get out at any point. You are two people driving in your own cars, and you decided, let's go over there, and you each get in your own car and you each drive over to this destination together. And then when you're at this destination, you decide, hey, why don't we go over to this destination? You drive over and you each are in your own car. A lot of women feel like they're in an airplane. Once they get in, they are trapped, and they're just a passenger on the airplane, and they are on this airplane until it lands, and the pilot will land that plane, and there's no way to get off. So I really want to get away from that scary, trapped feeling, and give everyone, men too, can feel that way. And I really want men and women to feel like, okay, I'm in my car. And and at any point we can turn off the exit over here. We can get off this highway. Okay. Or maybe I need to take a little break and I need to stop at the rest stop. So we take a break, then we're going to get off and we're going to communicate and we're going to get off. We're going to stop at this rest stop. And maybe we're going to spend the night at this rest stop. We're not going to keep going because it needs to feel like this is really something that both of us are on the same page and we're not just on this airplane till it lands. Okay. I'm reading the chat. Okay. So the point of no return is literally seconds before ejaculation. So I'm not talking about seconds before ejaculation. I'm talking about the whole journey before, minutes, many minutes, right? 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes before we can get off the exit. And we are not trapped. And so from my understanding, that is, that we're not talking about like seconds before. Okay. Here's a little slide. There's a little bit here on anatomy. So here I have a slide on the importance of arousal in pain reduction and in pleasure. So many women will complain of dryness or lack of orgasm or lack of desire, right? Lack of arousal, lack of desire. One of the things, and pain. So it's very important to know that as the female arousal system increases, your body is actually preparing for pain reduction and elimination. And it makes everything so much more comfortable. So if you look at the unaroused state, sorry, it's like very distracting to like be reading and talking at the same time. If you look at the unaroused state and the aroused state, you'll see that the clitoris engorges with blood. You have vaginal walls beginning to lubricate. You have the inner 2/3 of the vagina lengthening, expanding, letting more space for the penis, and your uterine cavity and pelvis jumps up in the system. Okay. So all these things are happening in the process of arousal. So as a woman is becoming more aroused, this is why foreplay, so to speak, is very important to make everything more comfortable, and to increase the lubrication, hormone secretion, and the blood flow. So imagine a dry sponge and a wet sponge. Okay. So the dry sponge, if you press on a dry sponge, it's like brittle and hard and like dry. And it's not comfortable to push on a dry sponge. As you become lubricated and aroused, the sponge fills up with blood, and that's the engorgement. And so lubrication and engorgement, that's what's happening in the vulva. So I have this great slide. It's the new slide for people who know my work. So this just shows, look, the clitoris and the penis, same stuff here, folks. Everything is filling up with blood, just like the penis, a little bit more obvious, but this is happening for the women too. So if you notice, the unaroused state, like let's look at the unaroused state of the female, you'll notice that where the clitoris interacts with the vagina, maybe that's not clear where that is, but it, I guess I don't have like a pointer, do I? I don't think I have. Hi, how do I do that?
Does your mouse just work like that? Like your mouse, are you in control that your mouse should be able to do it?
Can everyone see my mouse?
Yes, we
Oh,
can. see
okay,
it
fine.
now. Yeah.
So, okay, so this is the clitoris, and then this would be the vagina down here, right? So if you look at the unaroused state, you'll see that the clitoris is not, as you have intercourse, you're going to be missing the clitoris, right? But if the clitoris is engorged and you have vaginal penetration, you're actually going to be having more sensation and more pleasure. So what this means is that you need to get the whole clitoral system to be engorged, and then vaginal intercourse should be more comfortable, like the sponge, and it should be more arousing. Because look at how engorged and fluffy, or spongy is the word that we use, it can become. So if this doesn't happen to you, you probably aren't doing the most effective arousal techniques, or you have a lot of stuff happening in your head that are preventing you from getting aroused. So it's a combination of like physical, relational, and psychological. So why this may not happen for you. But the goal is that the entire vulva would become really filled up with blood, just like with a man, but it just happens a little slower. It's just not as quick. Okay. So, this is a slide. So to increase pleasure during intercourse, the clitoris should be engorged. So see how the vaginal opening is here. As one becomes aroused, it's actually hugging the vagina, and it should be pleasurable because the clitoris is all around the vagina. And actually the G-spot is just inside the vagina on the other side of this wall. So like right on the other side of this is the G-spot. So that once the clitoris is engorged, you're going to be able to hit the G-spot, and you're going to have pleasure, hopefully, during intercourse. A lot of people ask about this. They want to have more pleasure during intercourse. So this is what we're talking about. Okay. So I hope that this is clear to people. Okay. So the dual control model. So what this is referring to is there are gas pedals of sexual arousal, and there are brake pedals. So the gas pedals are what turns you on, what gets you going, and the brake pedals are what stops the car. Okay. So some people, men or women, are quick on the brake, quick on the gas. They get going fast. Okay. Some people, all it takes is a little bit of hugging, a little bit of kissing, a little bit of touching, and the gas pedal is going. Other people are slow on the gas and heavy on the brakes. So the brakes are, the sheets have to be just right. The temperature has to be just right. You have to smell just right. Your breath, the setting, the emotional setting, there's somebody says something, a smell, so many things could be a brake pedal. You hear something distracting. There's a lot of things could be brakes for people. Especially, let's say a man will touch a woman in a red zone. I don't think I have that slide in here this time. So basically the body can be described as like green zones, yellow zones, and red zones. So green zones are like safe to touch, like a green light. And then yellow is like, I have to be like a little bit more aroused before you touch a yellow zone, and a red zone is like, don't touch this. Okay. So the goal is that as you become more aroused, the red becomes yellow and the yellow becomes green. And then eventually things become green. Okay. So what happens commonly as a brake pedal is that a man will touch a red zone and he didn't realize it's red. And she's like, "Ee!" And the car is like squeaking to a stop. And she's like, I'm out of here. And she's done. So, so this is referred to as a break, as a sexual break. And what we have to do is we have to be able to maybe write down and articulate together, like, what are our gas pedals and what are our brakes? And it would probably be a good idea to communicate together. What are some of those things that really are brake pedals for you? And then it would be a good idea for you to learn how to get back on the train. So just because you had a little bit of a break doesn't mean you can't keep on going. But you need to be able to communicate, that it was a brake pedal, and hopefully the partner will, be more aware of those brakes and be able to not, do the things that make you brake. And then also figuring out what your gas pedals are, what gets you going, right? Okay, so I have another comment in here that women have a high level of arousal non-concordance. Men have a low level of arousal non-concordance. So what that means is that when a woman is wet, there's only about a 40% chance that she says she's sexually aroused. When a man has an erection, there's like a 90 to 95% chance that he says he's aroused. So when a man seems to be aroused, he probably is. When a woman seems to be aroused, she's probably not. That's what this means. So what this means is, for you, is that a lot of men will be like, great, she's wet, she's aroused. And that's actually arousal non-concordance, because she might be feeling that she's not aroused. She's not psychologically aroused. She's not erotically turned on. She's not there emotionally. And and it could be that it's just kind of the time of her cycle and she's just more wet and it has nothing to do with arousal. So it's important for the men out there to understand that women really have this is a real thing, arousal non-concordance. And what you need to do is you need to ask, you need to just communicate with words, because you can't tell on a woman necessarily, unless you know her really well and you know her signs. But just some of the physical signs of arousal really are not reliable for women. On the other hand, sometimes women's bodies are actually physically becoming aroused, but she has so much happening in her brain and in her head that she thinks she's not. And I'll have husbands say, but you were lubricated, you were breathing heavily, your body was flushed. They can go through all these symptoms, and it does seem like her body was reacting, and yet she doesn't think or feel that she was aroused. So then you can see that what we need to work on is that brain, the brain part, less the body part, because her body was working, but her brain was distracted or something else was going on, right? So it can be used both ways. But I just wanted to put this information out there for men, because I think that it is an important point. Okay. As far as consent, just because somebody said yes to something one time doesn't mean like for the rest of time it is on the table, and she's agreeing to it, or he. It's a continual conversation. Just because you said you want tea, how do you want that tea, right? Do you want herbal or black tea? Do you want it with milk, or do you not want milk? Do you want it with sugar or honey? So it's a constant discussion of, what do you feel like today? Not that, well, this is what you, last time or yesterday. So it's all the same that you're agreeing to now. Okay. Okay. One of the most common things that I see is pity sex. Okay. The definition of pity sex is a little bit of a wordy slide, but the definition of pity sex is that you decide that you're going to have sex for let's say your husband, and you decide, I'm not going to get turned on. I'm not going to try to get aroused. I'm just going to do this for him. And you've just decided, I'm not going to try to get aroused. You remember how this is different than the responsive sexual drive that we talked about in the beginning. The responsive sexual drive was, we're going to touch, but I'm touching because I'm hoping that I'm going to get aroused. And when I get aroused, I'm hoping I'm going to want to have sex, right? Pity sex is, I am agreeing to sex and I am not trying to go down that process of arousal. So this is a really common, but really bad idea. So I really, really want to impress upon everyone how harmful this is for everyone. This is terrible for you, the person who's doing the pity sex, and it's terrible for the partners. Ultimately, this is very unfulfilling. I wrote here the higher desire, this makes the lower desire spouse feel like the quantity of sex is just too much. And the short-term solution only exacerbates the problem. Pity sex is horrible for relationships and ends up making this problem even worse. The higher desires spouse's erotic needs are unfulfilled, and the lower desire spouse desires sex even less because they've reprogrammed their brain that sex is something for him, or sex is not pleasurable, or sex, I don't have pleasure, I don't have an orgasm. And people end up feeling used, and it makes that person desire sex even less. See how terrible that is for that person? Then for the man, let's say in that example, the higher desire spouse, it really leaves them feeling very emotionally unfulfilled. And then, they often see the solution as more sex. And then that just exacerbates the problem, because then they think that the solution is, I just need to have more sex. And so see how you get yourself into a pickle that way? Okay. I'm gonna save the questions till the end because I have so
I
much.
just wanted to hop in here quickly and mention how Torah really discusses how important it is that intimate relations have to be with great desire. And actually, the more love, the more passion, the greater the desire, the more they enable Hashem Shekhinah to be present during that time. And that's such a big element about working, like you said, working to have the desire, wanting to have that desire is super important. Otherwise, we haven't achieved what we want, which is oneness and unity and togetherness.
Exactly. And the desire is coming after the arousal. And so if you've decided, I'm not going to get aroused, then you're just cutting yourself off from the possibility of the desire. Okay. So a lot of people have this question about, is sex a need or a want? So people often frame sex as a human need. Okay. It's not a need. You will not die without sex. But in fact, humans do have a need for attachment. That is a need. They've done those studies with the monkeys, and the monkeys will cling to the fuzzy mommy that isn't even alive and doesn't even have any milk. And then there's the mom that's just the bottle of milk. And even though the bottle of milk is giving you the milk, the monkeys go toward the fuzzy attachment figure. So, human attachment, secure attachment, those things are actual needs. And a lot of times people satisfy their erotic attachment needs through sex. And that's how they know how they fulfill that attachment need. But that doesn't mean that they actually need the sex. It's that their erotic and attachment needs are being fulfilled when they have sex. And so they think that they need sex. The reason this is helpful is that if you have a difference in sexual desire, for example, a lot of times you can meet the higher desire spouse for the need for erotic connection or attachment without necessarily more sex. So it's just important to find out like what really is the deeper unmet emotional need here. And a lot of people will just say, I just need sex. I need sex. And it's not actually that simple. There's a deeper explanation going on here. And
what I love is that according to the Zohar, it actually says that the husband was given sexual desire because his wife needs him to have it so that she will feel loved and desired. And it's interesting in Binyan Havayis, he actually brings down that what is the need? The need is the husband's need to be attached to his wife, to be close. And sometimes when men actually understand that, when they have, so to say, a need, it's the need for the attachment. And so it helps them to do what it takes to feel attached to the wife and to have that emotional attachment, because that's really what Hashem is giving them, the drive, so that they should create this emotional closeness with their spouse.
Yes, exactly. And a lot of people will say to me, my love language is sex. That's not one of the love languages. It might be physical affection, right? So it's just important to reframe this like need aspect and what really is the emotional need. And I think that women can, in fact, be very uncaring when it comes to this need. I think they think, oh, he just needs sex. It's not that he just needs sex. There's something deeper happening here. Okay, so one time I had a man say that he felt like a gas station. He felt like she just rolls up, plugs it in, gives gas, rolls on out. And he felt like a gas station. And, I felt like that was a really, something that really stuck in my mind. That what does pity sex feel like then to that man? It feels like he's just, it's like this release that is so unsatisfying, so unfulfilling. So just really like give the relationship and the marriage and your husband more consideration that that does not feel good at all. And I think that's what that pity sex probably feels like. So I put that in there as kind of a visual reminder. Sometimes high desire, low desire can be masquerading as a difference in attachment styles. So sometimes, for example, like an anxious attachment style will be masquerading as high desire, and an avoidant attachment style will be masquerading as low desire. So before you get so caught up on who desires sex more and less, it really might be some of these deeper issues going on about who desires closeness more or less, right? Who wants more or less closeness or space? Sometimes some people just want more space from other people. Sometimes people feel very smothered or, and they have a little bit of an avoidant attachment. And sometimes people want to be constantly like touching and talking and how much closeness does a person really want? So is that really about sex? No, it's about attachment styles. Here's the goal. Okay. 10 signs of secure attachment in bed. I like this slide. Preferring sexual activity and committed romantic relationships, seeking long-term relationships based on trust, mutual understanding, and warmth, more positive sexual self-schemas, enjoying expressions of love and passion through touching, comfortable with experimenting in the bedroom with long-term partners, enjoying sex and being comfortable with intimacy, fewer doubts about intimate relationships, being more sexually restrictive, lower likelihood of sexual addiction. So, when we talk about attachment styles, and attachment, most of us, the goal is to become a securely attached version of ourselves, and to connect to our spouse in the most securely attached way. So we all lean in a little bit of a negative place. So do you lean a little anxious? Do you lean a little disorganized? Or do you lean a little bit avoidant? We all lean a little bit in one of these ways in our weaker times. But in our stronger times, the goal is that we're going to be our securely attached self. So the goal is, I'll try to be my securely attached self, you try to be yours, and then we connect our securely attached selves to make a secure attachment. And this is what a secure attachment looks like in bed. So, I do have slides on what those, how an avoidant attachment person acts in bed, or how an anxious attachment acts in bed, or a disorganized attachment. But that's a little bit beyond our scope of our talk. But I just thought I would put out there, often I hear that couples, one person feels that their sex life is a problem and they don't feel this secure attachment sexually. And the other partner doesn't feel that it's a problem, but it sounds like it is a problem because it's a problem to that other person. So, both people should feel that this is a secure attachment. Okay. Remember in the beginning when I talked about the three treatment goals, being relaxed, being in control, and being aroused? So here is a slide about being relaxed. Why is it important to be relaxed? In a study, a pivotal study, of rats, they took rats and they offered them things. There were some things they liked, and there were some things the rats didn't like. Okay, then they took the rats and they stressed them out. And they put heavy metal music, and the rats got really anxious and stressed out. So what happened was the rats didn't like the things they had previously not liked. And they also didn't like the stuff they had previously liked. So they didn't like anything because they were stressed out. Then they put them in a rat spa, and they put candles and Enya music. And what happened was the rats liked the stuff that they previously liked, and they even liked the things they previously disliked. And it is the same with humans. When you get a human in a situation where their brain is so relaxed and unguarded and safe and secure, what's going to happen is they're going to enjoy sensations, sensory experiences, stimulus, sexual experiences that they thought that they wouldn't like in a normal situation. So when somebody is complaining of pain, low desire, differences in desire, orgasm problems, etc., a huge treatment goal is, how do I relax more? Because if this person is more relaxed, they will be more receptive to pleasure. Okay, so you want to create a buffer before intimacy, which we've talked about mikvah, right? In the ideal sense, the going to the mikvah could be very relaxing. Some mikvahs are very relaxing. They have relaxing music. You take a bath. There's you can turn off the lighting. You're pampering yourself. You don't have to, have screaming children in the background. It could be a very relaxing experience in its best, right? And I understand that some people don't experience the mikvah like that. So, but yet this is aligned with Judaism, that there's this buffer. You don't just put the kids to bed and load the dishwasher and, pack the lunches and then just, straight into sex. The system is that you go to this mikvah. And I think this is built into the system. So creating this buffer before intimacy. So when it's not mikvah night, think about what that buffer should be. Maybe it's a little bit of alone time. Maybe it's reading your book. Maybe it's taking a walk in the evening. Maybe it's, having a cup of tea. Maybe it's having a hot shower. So think about what's your buffer, okay? And use mindfulness. Okay, many people, especially women, find it hard to stop thinking, okay? So women are better multitaskers than men, and men are more tunnel visioned. This is why men are better at typically at like hunting or goal-oriented sports, like getting the ball in the basket. So in fact, men are better at those goal-oriented behaviors like that, the tunnel vision. And women are better at multitaskers. They've done all sorts of brain studies where they've done MRI scans of women's brains, and they're illuminated everywhere. They're supposed to be doing one thing, but there's stuff happening all over the brain. And conversely, men's brains were like waffles. They were just these quadrants, squares that were completely dark. Nothing was happening. So men really are better at shutting off sections of their brain. So this works really well for sex for men. They can just shut off a lot of things for the most part, unless a man has a lot of anxiety. But by and large, this is not as much of a problem for men. And on the other hand, women's brains are like spaghetti. It's like a bowl of spaghetti, and there's just stuff happening all over the place. So what we need to do is we need to like darken our brains, darken the active thinking, illuminate the emotional and sensory feelings. So think of the night sky. Or if you think about it, maybe it makes sense to darken the room, because the distractions in an illuminated room really can be distracting, right? You see that pile of laundry that you were supposed to do, or you see, something over there that reminds you you have to do something, right? So the distractions really are harder for women. So darkening the room, darkening your active thinking in the brain. And, with these brains, it is that human beings have bigger brains, right? Larger brains, which is why humans have sexual dysfunction and animals do not. So really, it's these big brains that are getting in the way. Too much thinking. Okay.
What's interesting is that according to Kabbalah, it says Laila stands for Lila. What is mine is for her. That in general, the nighttime is like a time when she's more relaxed. She's not worrying that her husband is running off to work. No one's up and can hear. So that's the whole concept, is like a time when the woman will be the most relaxed.
Yes, understandable. Maybe the least distractions. Maybe that the kids are sleeping. There's a lot of sense in it. But if it's not the time that is most relaxing for you, that's fine. I want to put this image of the night sky just to kind of remind you that we really need to quiet those prefrontal cortexes, right? Okay. So the phases of arousal. I start the phases of arousal at a -10, and it goes all the way to a +10. So let's say a -10 to a -5 is like very anxious, angry, upset, and stressed. A -5 to a -2 is like pretty anxious, angry, stressed. And a lot of people are starting out, they're hanging out in their day a lot in the negative numbers, right? They're already at a -3 often. A -2 to a 0 is like slightly stressed, slightly frustrated, right? And then a 0 is neutral. Now you get into the positive numbers. A 1 to a 3 is like calm, relaxed, cozy sensations. That is the beginning of the phases of arousal. Okay? 3 to a 6, lessening of active thoughts happening in the mind. Tingling in genitals and breasts, feelings of engorgement, lubrication may begin, and 7 to 10. So reduce self-conscious thoughts and feelings, warmth in the body, the yellow and the red zones are becoming green, genital arousal that may end in climax. So what this slide should mean to you, I know it's a little bit, intellectual, but what this means to you is that your job is to get yourself to the 0. Okay. Show up at a 0. Show up in bed, open, not aroused, not in the mood. Show up in bed, neutral. You've taken care of yourself. You got yourself to a neutral place. You did what you needed to take care of yourself. And well, again, that might be a hard thing for you, but that's something you need to then work on. This is the goal. You get yourself to the 0. And then you meet. That's how you meet at the 0. And then together, you work yourselves up the ladder. Okay. And it's important that one person doesn't go too quickly, because what happens is if one person's like already an 8, and you're like all the way back at a 2, it's like, oh my goodness, this is hopeless. How am I ever going to catch up? And that's a very hard feeling for a lot of people. How am I going to catch up? You're already so far ahead of me. And it feels very disconnecting. So the higher desire, or the higher, faster gas pedal person, needs to slow themselves down a little bit, focus on the other person, help them get to a 3. So, that's how we need to deal with the difference in desire, by understanding where everyone is and not going so fast and having that a very disconnecting experience. And there's no reason why the number 2 person needs to feel rushed. Why should they be on the other person's schedule, right? Okay, so now how do you get from a 0 to a 10? A lot of people ask me. So that's the stages of touch. Now you do a 0 to 3 of stages of touch in order to go from 0 to 3 in the phases of arousal. You do a 3 to a 6 in the stages of touch in order to go from a 3 to a 6 in the phases of touch. Okay. You don't do erotic touch to get someone from a 2 to a 3. So for the men out there listening, don't do erotic touch for somebody who's at a 2. Because that's going to be a brake pedal. See what I'm saying? So what you want to do is have awareness. Where is my partner? How aroused are they? And like we were talking about the arousal non-concordance, you really may not know. And that's why it's important for you to really communicate and really know your partner. So a 0 to 3, that is relaxing touch. Touch your partner like you would touch a child. This is relaxing touch, rubbing their back, hugging. That is a cozy sensation, which starts the process of arousal in an adult. 3 to a 6, affectionate touch. This is when it becomes more romantic touching, such as caressing, kissing, breasts, etc. Now we're increasing some nudity. So you really need to have this awareness and be a really good listener. Where is your partner? And you need to know, what helps my partner get from a 4 to a 5? Do you even know what number they are? I get couples in session and I ask them, like, what number were you? And the man's like, oh, wow, I really thought you were an 8. And she's like, no, I was a 2. So it's like pretty far off. So it's really important that you guys are really understanding where the other person is. Then 7 to 10, we're talking about erotic touch. This is when we're getting into genital stimulation, intercourse, oral sex, etc. Okay. exit strategies. This is what we were talking about the airplane or the highway. You are not trapped on this plane until it lands. And what we mean by landing is the male orgasm in the vagina. So that is not your only exit. A lot of women feel trapped and they think before they've even hugged or kissed or anything, they're thinking, do I want that ending? And no, at this point, they don't. So then they're closed off to anything, right? So what we need to do is we need to take the pressure down. And we need to say out loud, like, we do not have to end it like this. We don't have to end in PIV, penis in vagina sex. It doesn't have to end that way. And the thing is if you say that, it's more likely to work. So it really does benefit you to have a more open and flexible idea about where are we going. And when somebody feels like they have that choice, they have that control, they can drive off the exit ramp at any point. They can go through any of these doors. Then it's more likely that, some of our goals might in fact happen. But it's just very important for a woman who gets very tripped up about that, because a lot of women get like, I can't do anything because I feel like I'm signing on to sex, or I don't know if I want to have sex, or I'm not aroused at all yet. So they feel very, that feels like a very big issue. And I'm saying, let's just take one step in front of the other. Can we get from a 0 to a 1? Like, how do you get from a 0 to a 1? And it's important that you know that, and it's important that your partner knows that.
Rivka, can you elaborate on sort of this paradox of that you want to allow someone to have more control, and yet it's sometimes the control that is the problem, because the woman often needs to relax and let go also?
Okay. You can only let go of control if you already had the control in the first place. That's my answer. So that is the psychological experience of orgasm, is the relinquishing of control. But you're not going to allow yourself to orgasm if you didn't feel that you had that in the first place. So women who do not feel in control of sex, they will withhold that orgasm because they don't have the control to let go of it, because they didn't feel that they had it in the first place. So that's my response to you.
Would you interchange or distinguish between control and trust?
Yeah, I use the word control, but a lot of people have issue with that word. To me, I understand that's a little bit of a buttony word. And I don't mean that I have control over you and you have control over me. It's that we have control over ourselves, and we, autonomy, and it's more that I feel that I have total control over the situation. I can exit at any point. We can do this or we can do that. And we're both sitting in our cars and we're both in the driver's seat. I am not getting into your vehicle and you're the driver. No, and if you have that feeling, then I think, you can choose to enter into a different fantasy. So then you can enter into your erotic fantasy. So a lot of people, for example, will have a fantasy of, let's say, one person being a little bit more passive or like subservient, and that's their erotic fantasy. But you can only enter into that erotic fantasy if you had that power and control in the first place. So
well, I think that it's the ability to be honest with each other. If we want to really talk about it, because I remember working with someone, and she came to me and she was telling me that, like, her husband has, let's say, higher desire, and she loves to be with him because she loves the closeness, but she started, faking. orgasm, so that, because he never wanted to be together if she didn't feel that she was really, really enjoying. So,
Mm.
but she wanted to be together with him. She liked that closeness. She liked, the feeling of being together. So she started faking so that he should, feel that. And I told her it's a very big mistake. I said, because if you're going to start doing that, then you're not being true to yourself. And you're not going to be able then, when you really want to, you're not going to be able to do it because you took this on. I said, so it's really important to be honest and explain to him that you really enjoy being together with him. And even if you're not going, to orgasm, it's fine because you love it and you desire it. And that makes you happy. And that will then give you the freedom not to have to sort of say, put on a show. He knows that you desire it and you work it out. It's about the ability of being honest. And whatever it is, it has to be your desire.
Mhm.
Maybe not this try, but it's about the desire and being honest. And like you said, and knowing that that's within the relationship, and that can look different ways. So you could, even if you're not necessarily going to get there, but you could really enjoy and desire that closeness in however that looks.
100%. And also, it is unrealistic to expect that you're going to have an orgasm every time. And even the leading expert in male sexual functioning, Barry McCarthy, says that men only consistently will have an orgasm 8 out of 10 times. So of attempted intercourse. So that's within the totally normal range of male functioning, is 8 out of 10 times. So think about what it may be for women. It's probably less than that. So it's okay if this doesn't happen every time for the man or for the woman. Okay. Okay, so difference in desire. I have a couple specific slides. We no two people have the same desire for anything. I put sushi here because one person might want to have sushi every day. One person might be fine with sushi once a month. So it doesn't mean that you don't like sushi or you don't love each other, right? You have to think about, what are these meanings that you're deriving from this? And it's important to come to an agreement about the goal for frequency. It's important to schedule sexual activity so that the higher desire spouse doesn't have to initiate outside of those times. Because the higher desire spouse is often anxious. When is it going to happen? When is it going to happen? But if they know, it's on the schedule and like this is the plan, they can relax a little bit. So that is a help to the higher desire spouse, but it's also a help to the lower desire spouse because they're not anxious that the higher desire spouse is going to be initiating every day until they get, until they're successful. Where's my mouse? There. Normalize that the lower desire spouse should not expect to wait to be horny or be aroused before initiating. That's unrealistic. They should engage in sexual activity when they feel open and they have some interest in getting in the mood, right? That's when you're at that neutral and you're open and maybe you had some emotional intimacy. That would be the goal. And no more pity sex. Okay. How to help the lower desire spouse. We're looking at the sections of the pie, right? If you look back from the beginning. So what are the psychological causes? What are the relational causes? And what are the medical or biological causes? So that's what you can try to think about is like, what's contributing to maybe some of this, like, let's say lower desire. One can look into that. So, we talked about the 70 to 80% of women have the responsive sexual desire. So help them come up with a more realistic expectation. And it's about motivation. It's not about desire. Okay. So it's about motivation to plan sexual, intimacy, or that's the same, let's say with mikvah night. Is this planned out? So that's motivation. That's not desire. and you're going to schedule sexual activities, and you're going to try to get in the mood. Okay. Oh, and I put this picture of this man washing dishes because there was a study that showed that men increasing housework was consistent with higher sex frequency. So, just that is a tip out there.
Well, there's a very famous story actually of someone who came to the Rebbe and they said, I heard that folding the talis right after Shabbos is a big segula for Shalom Bayis. And the Rebbe said, I'm not sure about that, but if you roll up your sleeves and you wash the dishes, that's a big segula.
Yeah, exactly. So that is statistically supported.
Rivka, if you don't mind, can we also just mention, like you've said, that although you mentioned that it's maybe more common with women, that when it's the man that may have the LDS, the low desire, the types of things that affect him could be like a work day that went bad, stress, whatever it is. Because I think some women, we've seen in our comments that it's not always the women, it's the men also. And maybe some of the women are less familiar with that sensitivity that the husband might actually have to what goes on in his day that can actually affect things.
Absolutely. And it is plenty common, and it feels more shameful or embarrassing because it gets a little less publicity. And I do have a slide in here that's more specific to the men. I think it's later. But definitely, I think that, but you know what? We don't even have to worry about desire, right? We don't even have to like label and worry about it, because if you schedule intimacy, then it's like on the schedule, and it doesn't have to be like one person's the hire and one person's the initiator and the other person's the denier, right? Instead, it's like both are motivated.
That's the beauty of the mitzvah of Ona. It's like you schedule, you kind of have your goal and it's there, and you don't leave it up to just desire. It's about, this is important for us, and therefore we want to make it happen.
Just like Shabbos, right? You're not always in the mood to like cook Shabbos, right? And yet everybody does it every Friday or Thursday night. And it's like, whether we like it or not, we're going to enjoy ourselves, right? So, you go through all the movements, like you cook the food and you eat the chicken, you have the wine, you go through all the behaviors.
You sing the songs.
And then the desire might strike you because you're like, oh, well, now that I am in this situation, now this is nice and pleasant. So it's the same idea. Okay, so help the LDS find come to awareness about in what conditions are they successful, right? When are they more successful? Time of day, after quality time, certain lighting, the house being cleaned, after hot shower, during vacation. A lot of people say that. So, try to help the LDS person come up with, when are they successful, and kind of make that list of like what's going on for them in those times that they do feel that they have more arousal, so you can replicate that, hopefully more often. Okay. There is evidence that 1 hour extra sleep the night before is corresponded to 14% increase in odds of engaging in sexual activity. So, obviously feeling more rested. Doesn't seem very surprising to anyone. And again, like more foreplay, we're talking about the stages of touch, the phases of arousal, right? Okay. And then, there's, let's say, a lot of women will not feel connected with their sexual sense of self. That's another thing we see a lot on the group chat, or the Facebook group. They were raised in a certain way where they shut off all sexuality, and then they were supposed to like turn it on like a light switch. It's important to encourage people that yes, you have different identities, right? You have your professional self, your being a mother self. It can be really hard to transition from like being a mother or being at work or whatnot, and then transitioning to this different role. So, I just wanted to put that out there. There's no like easy solution, but, tapping in to that sexual sense of self or their erotic self, that is important. Sometimes that could just take some time to have that transition, that buffer period, right? For the HDS, many people will throw darts as initiations. They'll like initiate like every single day and hope that one of them will stick. This is not a good idea. That's common, but it actually backfires because the LDS feels like hounded, and it causes even less sex. So what is a better strategy is to talk about when would be a good time that we could set aside for each other, and framing it more like that, not like a higher desire spouse is just initiating like every single day and hoping something sticks.
Also, I once heard something which I thought was phenomenal, that if the lower desired spouse can look at the higher desired spouse and say like, thank God for you, because you have this high desire, it really helps us to maintain our relationship. Because if it was up to me, it kind of would go by the wayside. So instead of resenting it, actually appreciating it and say, thank God about this. And then when the higher desire person feels the appreciation for it, it doesn't feel like a desperation, like, oh, my wife really appreciates it, or my husband really appreciates it.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, we're in like a cat and mouse game where a lot of times, someone will be like cornering someone so much that that person is just like constantly pushing them away. We need to get them out of the corner, and we need to get them talking about a plan that they can both agree on, and that is not the higher desire spouse initiating. This is about them both coming to a decision about what they want to do about this and motivation. And then we want to talk about let's say for the higher desire spouse, like we kind of talked about in the beginning, what are these unmet emotional needs? A lot of my work is, what do you get through the sex that you could maybe get through a different way, so that reduces, I think somebody is, so how can we get your needs met in a different way? And also a lot of times, it is this need for validation, for affirmation, for feeling loved, for intimacy and attachment. Whether it's the woman or the man. Let's say the woman, for example, let's say that the man isn't a big talker, maybe he's not like very talkative, let's just say. So the woman feels really connected to him when they have sex. And then maybe when they're Anita, I've heard many women say that they kind of feel ignored by their husbands because this physical part of the relationship is not there. And then, they kind of just go about their day and their husbands kind of ignore them. So when they have sex, they feel connected, they get attention, they get love, they get affirmation, they get validated, they get like all these. So, it's important to talk about like, what is it that you get? Because it's not that it's actually the sex, right? Which means there could be not more sex, but your emotional needs can be met. It's also important to try to figure out if they're using sex to emotionally self-regulate. Often it could be a mental health concern that they're using sex to regulate their emotions. So if that's happening too, yeah.
It's a bit of a mystery. Before they're married, let's say in the more classic case where women will say their husbands, just the frequency is way more than they can handle. And before they were married, the men didn't have that outlet. So here, let's say if it is an underlying attachment issue, where did they channel that? Like, when you talk to your clients,
Mhm.
what did they do with those unmet needs before they were married? How did they manage them?
So one thing is that a lot of people told themselves, like, when I am married, then my needs will be met. And it kind of got them in like like they could kind of like go for the sprint, and they put all of these needs for when they got married. And then it just was too much for one person to handle. And unfortunately, there's a lot of use of pornography, masturbation, things like that. So certainly there were other outlets that were being explored. And they were thinking, but when I'm married, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to need to do this because I'm going to be married. So that is a common theme that I hear, and unfortunately much more common than we hope for. So I don't know if that answers your question. Yeah. And we want to encourage the higher desire spouse not to take it too personally as a rejection, right? It's not necessarily about love, right? Or it's not that he doesn't find her attractive or something like that, right? So we're going to schedule intimacy, and we're going to work on quality over quantity. Instead of the darts, right, and having so much quantity, we're going to reduce the quantity and we're going to increase the quality. And what's going to happen is you're going to have a more emotional feeling, and more erotic sense of fulfilling, and the quantity isn't more. So it's really a win-win. So here are some other things I just want to throw out there. Focus on intimacy rather than sexual performance. Oh, this is another thing for, like, let's say performance anxieties. So let's say commonly you would have, let's say, erectile dysfunction or premature ejaculation. A lot of people are so focused on the goal. Let's say the goal is, penis in vagina sex. So that can really mess with, a lot of people, and it can cause these performance problems. So we want to get away from those goals. So the goal is not on intercourse and orgasm. I want to reframe the goal: pleasure and connection, because then you're always going to be successful, because pleasure is not pass fail. Do you remember the phases of arousal? It's a 3 is better than a 0, or a 6 is better than a 0. So it's not, was it a 10 or was it a fail? So it's not pass fail. It's the focus is on, was there pleasure? Was there connection? And you can always be successful on that. And, you don't have to be so much emphasis on the erection, right? A lot of men get very anxious. And that will cause them to have problems in that area. Instead, focus on the things that are more reliable. Your hands, for example. So yeah, there's so much that is way beyond the scope of this talk, but yeah, there's so many areas of things that we could talk about. Okay, so yeah, we talked about intimacy, the emphasis on connectedness, togetherness, relationship. We talked about the end goal doesn't have to be orgasm, for example. Being flexible about positions. Don't emphasize erection, penetration, or male orgasm. Focus on pleasure and connection. Okay. These are some medical interventions for low desire. So there's Addyi, which is an FDA-approved medication for low desire in women. Vyleesi injection. I'm just letting you know these things are out there. Testosterone. Some women are prescribed local vaginal cream, testosterone cream as far as systemic. Some women are given estrogen vaginal cream. Some women are prescribed Viagra as a gel form, and they would apply that to the vagina and vulva. And that helps in blood flow. So if you remember the sponge, that helps in that blood flow. So it helps that like squishy sponge situation. Cialis, that's for men. And and I put in here that my experience is that SSRIs have more benefited women and men in sexual functioning than decreased it. So I just wanted to put that out there. Sexual aversion, it's not the same as low desire. So some people, they don't prefer swimming, but that's different than having like visceral anxiety and fear when you get near the swimming pool, right? So sexual aversion is treated as a phobia, and it is not treated in the same way as low desire. So I just, if you experience fear, anxiety, dread, and panic as you anticipate sex, that is really more of an aversion. That is not low desire. So everything we were talking about today falls under more the category of like low desire. I just want to put that out there that this is in fact different. Difficulties with orgasm. We talked about this like fear of relinquishing control. So if you get a very anxious person or a very type A type of person, that is often going to come with some difficulties with orgasm. So I don't need to read all of this, but, empower her to prioritize pleasure, not to just get it over with. Self-stimulation would be a good idea for somebody who struggles with orgasm, because again, this is usually related to loss of control. Okay, and then pelvic pain, approximately 20% of women in their 20s and 10% of women overall experience it. Like I said in the beginning, if you have a bad reaction, like you vomit every time you eat chicken, you're definitely not going to enjoy yourself or desire. So this problem trumps all the other problems that need to be treated first. You need to figure out why you're vomiting before you treat the why you don't desire chicken. If you go to the doctor and you're like, but I don't desire it, you're going to get nowhere so long as you keep on having this physical problem. So this is the problem that will trump all the other treatment plans. And you're going to treat this first. So you're going to, these are some examples of pelvic pain disorders. If you do experience one of these things, please see a specialist, not just a typical OBGYN. And these things, there's a lot of treatments, including sex therapy, physical therapy, and treatment with a doctor that specializes it. Here are some great books that I like. And all the photos were used for educational purposes. And that's all. So that's what I have.
Thank you very much. It was so informative, and I really appreciate how you broke it down. You gave us so much information. One of the things that I found very interesting that I didn't think about it before, but we know that ona means a response to her. So a husband is supposed to notice when his wife wants and respond to her. But you gave it another meaning also, is to have a respond to her within the whole, the whole being together. It's not only initially if she's wanting to, maybe that, she won't, like you said, won't be spontaneous desire, but through the whole process to constantly be aware, of where she's at.
Not to mention the translation of time, right? That planning that time aside, setting the time aside, that's the same idea with scheduling. So you're using motivation to schedule that. It's not that you're using sexual desire to schedule. And I hope that everybody out there like really, really hears me, that try not to feel rejected if you don't have desire before you even started to do anything. Because like, why would you? Right? So I have a lot of direct messages. Oh my goodness.
That's a
I
really
just have a
important
quick
one.
comment, if I may.
think while Rivka's just looking at some of the direct questions that were not posted to everyone. So Rivka, do you mind taking a minute to just look to see if in the course of your presentation, you might have answered a lot of them? Those that are asking about the books that you recommended on your last slide, maybe you'll just text it to one of us and we'll make sure when we
Yeah.
put the recording on, we can add the names of the books. Do you also, for attachment, recommend Sue Johnson's Hold Me Tight, or is there another one?
Definitely.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
And also anyone who wants the slides should private message myself through Facebook, and then Amir Tashem, we will send it out to them.
Rivka was
Okay.
okay with the slides, you're saying?
Yes.
Wow, that is very generous. Thank you.
So anyone who has questions now, if they can just put it into the chat, and Rif was gonna go through it.
Okay.
I just wanted to make a quick comment. So I work in the legal field. I specialize in family law. And I'm not sure how the family law works in the States, but in Canada, the law says that in order for the couple to be granted a divorce with a divorce certificate, they must be separated for exactly 365 days, including having shown to the majesty that they've tried to go to counseling and things like that. And it's very interesting because oftentimes couples, they just need space away from each other. And then when they do go to counseling, once they're calm, they're able to actually work on their issues and they don't end up in marriage, in a divorce. And from what I gathered in this presentation is that even whether it's like his desire, her desire, it all goes back to the relationship and the communication that you have with the person. So it's very interesting that it's not about how fast can I satisfy the other person. It's let's sit down and talk about it when we're calm at an appropriate time. And I think it goes very well with the legal field where they actually want you to just stop, get everything aside and just think about how can we make this work? What makes me feel good? What doesn't make me feel good?
Thank you.
Absolutely. Somebody's asking, I mean, this is like always the halachic issue about the obligation for ejaculation to happen, inside the vagina. So that is always where women are feeling very trapped. And this person is saying like, it's hard not to feel guilty if you get off the plane. So it's a hard issue, it's a hard issue, but it's about him being able to emotionally self-regulate, right? You're not there to be a vessel for him. It's not just this one-way deposit. You're not the gas station, you're not the car, it's like, so.
No, but I think Rivka also, I think there is something, because I have a few times mentioned that husbands, let's say, for example, that they said that like they're very patient and they give to their wife and she has pleasure and then boom, they're cut off, So I think that it's
Very
important
hard.
when we're talking about that we're talking about in a healthy relationship. And like you said, we're not talking about that they got to a certain point and that it's a few seconds before. We're talking
Yeah.
about, something where that's, before, and they talked about it and there's not the arousal and they know each other and they deal it. But there is also the idea that once we get to a certain point, it is about, it's not only for myself, it's for us. And that's something
And if we're
important.
at that point, like we talked about, hopefully, he is not a 9.5 when she's still a 2. So hopefully he has been able to emotionally self-regulate and hold himself back so that even if he is now a 9 and she's a 6, she's okay with having vaginal intercourse at a 6. So that's not saying you can't do that. It's just that it's probably not a very good idea if she's like a 1. So and how is it that she was a 1 and he was a 9.5? That's indicative of some other stuff going on. So we have to
Exactly.
figure out how to stay together and not get so far apart on that scale. And you might have situations of, like, let's say premature ejaculation or difficulty with emotional self-regulation, where so those might be an individual concern, and it's not her job then to be there if she's just a 1.
And that's
Yeah.
why it's important, let's say at that point, if she's seeing that or feeling that, then say, 1 minute, this is not the way the Torah said it should be. And therefore, what's going on within our relationship, that we can understand what's going on and reach out to the college teacher, reach out to a therapist, reach out to her Rav, so that they are doing it, like we said, in the way that Torah says, which is desire, both mutual satisfying, both they're enjoying each other's company and knowing how it should be, how it should look. And I always tell my, my colleagues when I teach them or train, don't wait, until it's like, oh my gosh, I'm choking. It's like, 1 minute, I feel something, I'm not, something's a little bit, let's talk. Sometimes we can do very minor changes and it can transform the whole relationship, Don't wait until it becomes a problem. Just something's uncomfortable, something's not working, you're not enjoying it, let's talk about it.
Somebody's asking, how can a woman get over the guilt of being more complicated and time consuming to reach sexual satisfaction than her husband? She feels like it's so unfair that she requires him to do so much work. I mean, I think that you are entitled to your pleasure and your experience and your body, and there's nothing wrong with needing more time. And why should you be focused on judging yourself according to his schedule? So, just because he's faster doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. Maybe he's a microwave and you're a crock pot. That doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with being a crock pot, like that you're not a microwave, you're just different.
But I also think that it's important for women to know, like, we totally believe that, yes, a woman's role is not passive. A woman's role is also to put herself out, to be an integral part, to also, we know that in Torah, it's like it's very beautiful thing when a woman initiates, that we're not just passive waiting for someone to do someone to get us there. It's together we are getting there together.
Definitely, that is so true. And in the phases of stages of touch and the phases of arousal, that is definitely an active phase. So this is not definitely not a passive.
It says, like, a woman is Isha, both of us are fire, and we have to bring our passion to the relationship, to our intimacy. If we want to achieve oneness, well, there has to be passion,
Mhm.
I also want to add to that, what this talk has also been so much about is education. And the woman who feels that guilt now has this to share with her husband, to show, let me explain to you this slide. Let me explain to you the female response. And now understand there's nothing wrong with us. There's nothing wrong with her. This is the process. And let's just enjoy it and take more time. And we're all good.
Yeah. And somebody's asking, if the woman takes so much more time and the man takes so much less time, how do you time that? Right. So, it might be that you need to do a lot more touching and focus on her on the front end, right? And less on him, because if he is getting so aroused so quickly, that's going to, like I said before, create such a distance between them. If he's just going fast up the ladder and she's left behind. So focusing on her, that will help bring her, along. And so that's what the time is spent doing. And, the intercourse could just be like the last few minutes, or that could not be the ending, and the ending could be returning to her. So that is another ending, right?
Actually, can you just elaborate on that? Because I don't think a lot of people are familiar with that.
What I meant, if people aren't familiar with that, would be that if she is not fully satisfied yet and he has already ejaculated, why not turn and focus on her maybe manually, to give her pleasure after intercourse. So this is like, why does it have to be in this schedule of events? We can have a flexible idea of the schedule of events.
Which is interesting because one of the things that they bring down actually is that it's advised that about some time or even some, sperm bring down a half an hour, a husband should stay in tune with his wife, spending time with her, which would be the same exact thing, be in tune where she's at, what she needs, that closeness, knowing that it's all about the relationship. It's not about the act, of penetration.
Let's see. Yeah, I mean, I think people are still, having a lot of concerns about this whole issue of the goal, and the goal has to be this PIV, right? And it's true. I mean, if you are on any Kala teacher chat, we discuss this issue all the time. So this is not a simple problem. So, it is a complicated issue, but I think going out toward this in the idea that the goal is pleasure and connection, that helps kind of relax people, and it can help that the arousal can take place. So I think it's not necessarily the first and foremost goal.
And I also think it's important for everybody, for us to realize, even as women, like you were mentioning before, that when the vaginal area is full with, with blood, and it is engorged, and it is very pleasurable, actually, for the husband, for there to be penetration in that way. So when it's done, when a woman is aroused, it actually is, the natural thing is that the woman does want the husband actually for there to be penetration. So a lot of times when we're reading in the books or knowledge, or we hear, we say, a woman doesn't necessarily need that, but really it actually even brought down in Gemara that a woman does desire full penetration of her husband because she feels the oneness and the unity. So if we're not desiring it, that's another question. Like, why am I not? Why is that not something that's giving me pleasure?
Maybe that's the avoidant attachment.
Exactly. So it's important for, I think, us as women to know that we actually do really enjoy it. And penetration can be very enjoyable. And I think they've done a study, which I just recently saw, that actually vaginal orgasm can be even more pleasurable than just plain clitoral orgasm. So when we know that it could be, and that we could, and we're not, let's be curious. Let's be curious. Let's ask ourselves questions. Let's find out, what's going on, why not? Oh, this is something that is really enjoyable for a woman. This is something that brings unity and oneness. So like you said, it's about feeling the force and the anxiety that can stop. But if we open ourselves up to it and understand that it's pleasurably and beautiful, then we'll be curious and we'll get there.
Okay, let's see. Somebody's asking, so the average amount of time, somebody missed a slide. What was the average amount of time that it takes a woman to reach orgasm? It was 45 minutes. Somebody answered that for them. Great.
But also, I think there are a lot of women who can be faster than that also.
Definitely. And that's from the beginning of sexual stimulus. So that's the beginning of touch, or, the beginning. So that doesn't necessarily mean the beginning of like vaginal touching. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, do you have any other questions? That I think I covered most of the questions that were on the chat. I mean, there's just like so much to cover. It's impossible to do a continuing ed for adults, in 1 hour, or now it's 2 hours.
It's really been fantastic. I believe that this is like the Avodah of today. It's really about becoming one and bringing unity. And we know when we bring unity between the couple, it brings actually unity in the entire world, you know? And this is really about, this is the work of today for us to concentrate on our intimacy. I think that's why it's so crazy in the world, so that we need to look into the Torah and says, hey, what does Torah say? Which is so wholesome, so beautiful for a couple really to connect and want. And we know that like you said, what's the need? The need is the connection. The need is the oneness. And Hashem gave us this incredible gift to be able to connect, to feel that connection. And that's really what it is. It's about connection, unity, and oneness. So someone's asking, where do we post it? We post it in Jewish Women Talk About Intimacy on Facebook. You know, if you want to be, if you're just joining us now, as long as you've been on Facebook for quite a while, usually, and there's a picture there, we accept you right away. If not, it's good if someone on our group invites you. If not, just send a message to me privately. You know, I just you know, come on. Kind of, I've been on the webinar, so because we do try to be careful who we do let into our group. Rivka said that she will also send us the slides, which we are really grateful for. And anyone could also private message me through that.
Yeah, there's
Again,
just
it's
so
Jewish
much
Women.
to cover. It's impossible to squish everything in any amount of time. I just hope that people, you know, get from today that, you know, just having a more flexible idea and not so linear, you know, model, and more understanding about how, you know, men work, women work, you know, things may be different. You know, and we just talked about how it might appear as high desire or low desire. And in fact, it might be these other things going on, right? Like attachment issues, or it could be mental health issues, anxiety, stress, you know, medical conditions. We talked about that, you know, and there's just, yeah, it's just impossible to summarize, but I hope that
I think the message, yeah.
Something.
I think the message is that this should be a beautiful part of our life, mutually enjoyable, and that it's worth working on. That if it's not that, you know, then it's worth working on, because this is an incredible gift. We know that Rabbi Yaakov Emden says that when it's done in you know, when it's done in the right way, when it's done in holiness, to bring the couple together, then there is nothing holier than that can bring a couple to the highest levels of Kedusha. And therefore, it is worth, so to say, like we put an effort to Shabbos and we do everything to make it beautiful and wonderful and enjoyable. This is something that we need to concentrate on, and we should make it a priority, really make it a priority in our life, that this part of our life should be beautiful. And like we said, mutually enjoyable, mutually pleasurable for the couple.
I mean, so thank you everyone so much for being
Thank
here.
you very much, really. It was wonderful, really wonderful.
Thank you
So
so much.
appreciative.
You're welcome. So I'll send the PowerPoints to Hannah, and then she can email them to whoever would like the slides. If you just don't mind, you know, keeping my name on them, and I don't mind that if you share them, but you know, I did create them myself.
Definitely appreciate it. So check us out, Jewish Women Speak About Intimacy. You can also follow me on Instagram on Hannah Karbach. That's where we post our speech, our talks, our webinars, and people who have questions have a chance to ask questions, and we try to get to as many as we can. Once again, Rivka, Hatzlacha Rabba, and everything you do. It is like really the work of Hashem, what you're doing.
Thank you.
And it's an incredible zchus to do it. So, and thank you for doing it in such a beautiful, honorable, and
Thank you.
really wonderful way. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you.
Well,